One, they're not here.
Huh?
They're not here today.
They're not here today.
No.
Okay, that'll be good.
Well,
Wait a minute, the loan's here.
No, transportation is not.
Oh, transportation, okay.
Right.
We
So
got you.
Now it's AR Long.
No, Rashawn said he had an update
He's
for
up
us.
to now.
No, not Mr. Long, the transportation. He has-
Sean, do you have an update?
I mean, the consultant is not here, but I'd be happy to. I'm one of the stakeholders. I work for Jacobs, and I can give you a kind of an
Everybody
illustration
all right
of
with
it.
that?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's proceed, Madam Clerk, with that. He's gonna give the update on the transportation. Okay?
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Mayor, Council, the last CTP was adopted in 2013, and this year, in fact, last year, all the 8 cities got together and decided to do an update of this comprehensive transportation plan for South Fulton. They kick off the meeting in February of this year, and the goal is to have the study to be completed in July of 2020. And what I would like to do is to walk you to what happened since February up to now. And the decision was because it's time to update the CTP, because number one, ARC every 5 years, they put a pot of money for the cities to update their transportation plan. And they encourage the city every 5 years to do that. Since the last one we did was in 2013, that was the time to do it. The study cost about $625,000. $500,000 are federal dollars from ARC, and $125,000 is a local match from the 8 cities. The local match is based on the proportion on your population size. The population of the city of South Fulton is about 18% of the South Fulton population. So therefore, they contribute about 18% of that money, which equates to about $68,000. And the study has 3 committees. One is what they call a PMT. The PMT is the project management team. They're the one that instruct the consultant what to do, to review the documents, and if there's any suggestion, they provide the suggestion to the committee. And the project management team is made up of one city, usually they encourage a public director to be the city representative on that committee. And Mr. Antonio Valenzuela is the one that represents the city of South Fulton. In addition to that, there is a stakeholder committee. This stakeholder committee is made up of no more than 40 people because they want to keep it a size where they can control everybody. And also the last one is the policy committee. The policy committee is made up of all the mayors of South Fulton. So the total size is 8. And the policy committee is very important because this is the only committee that has the authority to approve the document. Not only to approve it, but also to adopt a resolution on behalf of the cities. The study has really 4 important milestones. The first one is to come up with a vision, goal, and objective for the study area, which is South Fulton. The vision, goals, and objectives are the ones that they kind of use in 2013. But what they're doing now, they're going to refine it based on input from the PMT, the stakeholder committees, the mayor, and the general public. So they are currently in the process of doing that. The second phase, or the second milestone, it's really looking at the existing condition. Remember, the existing condition in 2013 are not the same. The land use have changed, the transportation networks have changed, the demographics have changed, and also the structure of South Fulton has changed. Now we have a new city that we didn't have in 2013. The third one is probably the most important one to us. This is when they're going to come up with recommendations to be funded. Now, ARC made it clear that in order to receive federal funds, all your projects must be drawn from a comprehensive transportation plan. So therefore, we as a city or the region has to be very careful on the type of project we selected, because those are the only projects that can really move forward for federal funding. Now, if we decide to pay for these projects with TIS Plus or general funds, then it's okay. But any projects that we are seeking federal funds must come from the CTP. And lastly, he has to be financially constrained. So therefore, once we identify all the projects and the recommendations, we have to make sure that the first 10 years of the CTP is financially constrained. Wherever the money is coming from, general funds, TIS Plus, and so on, those are the projects that can be identified in the first 10 years. The rest of the project will go in what they call an aspiration plan. That means wherever the money will come from, whoever has it, then they'll pay for it. In terms of public involvement, they're looking at 4 different strategies for public involvement. The first one is what they started last month and doing this month, which is meeting with city council. They go to every single city, 8 cities in South Fulton, they're meeting with the council, so on and so forth. And they intend to do a public meeting in September. And the purpose of the meeting will be threefold: to number one, show them the goal and objective, get input from the public, and if they need to go back and refine the vision, the goals, then that will be the time to do it. And in October, they plan to have a bus tour where I'm assuming like a motor bus, and everybody will ride the South Fulton. And number one, identify any issues that they may have, but also because as part of the MOA, the consultant is required to identify 10 critical corridors that they want to make a funding recommendation for. One of the things that's very important is that they're going to help us with the application process. When it's time to apply for funding, now that we can use those will be project ready, so something that we can take to ARC and get those projects funded. And lastly is in terms of the project selection, that's very important. They're looking at, currently what they're doing is solicit input from the different committees, but they would like to put together a matrix. Those are the things that they're going to look at to evaluate projects. They're going to look at safety. I mean, I don't think those are really prioritized yet, but those are the things, the metrics that they're going to look at. Safety, public health, system preservations, project readiness, because this is one of the things a lot of people complain is that those projects, they never get built. We always planning, but we don't build. So we want to make sure that whatever projects that come out of the recommendations, they are ready to be built. And because the project, the funds come from the Atlanta Regional Commission, they want to make sure that those projects have a regional significance. Although it's really constrained within South Fulton, but they want to make sure that those projects also goes beyond the boundaries of the city. We have some corridors, for example, from Camp Creek Parkway to Fulton Industrial, you name it. Those are crosses the South Fulton to go to other counties. And they will be looking at connectivity, which is very important, whether it's sidewalk connectivity, whether it's roadway connectivity. They're going to look at all these things. Lastly, they will look at mobility options. What do we need in terms of mobility options? Transit is one thing they're going to look at as one of the mobility options. And that's all I have for now. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is everybody into the queue? I want to make sure. Madam Clerk, let the record reflect that Mr. Khalid and Ms. Gilliard has joined us since roll call. Is everybody into the queue? Let me give me a minute to do that. Yes. There you are. Yes, there you are. Yes, yes. Councilwoman Gilliard?
Hello, how are you? Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm looking at the document that was, I'm
Let the
looking.
record show that. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm looking at the document that was given to package, that's in our package. And on upcoming engagement, it talks about public meetings in September and bus tour that you talked about, and the roving outreach, which is outgoing. What does that mean?
What page?
That's the page, upcoming engagement. It's right after outreach.
Is that page 15 or 59?
I don't have numbers on it.
Oh, okay. Is that the one that
Yes.
that has the city council meetings and so on?
It's 50.
She's reading.
It's 50.
Yes, yes. And I'm sorry, what is the question?
It was roving outreach, which is ongoing.
Yes, this is when, this is not really kind of a formal, for example, sometimes when you ride the train, somebody will get on the train and ask you questions. Sometimes they have, if there's a public event on a weekend, for example, they have people, they dispatch people, they go and interview you. So it's something that is ongoing throughout the year. It's really based on what different events, different.
Well, I'm sort of like a little bit shocked because we had very few buses in South Fulton.
No, I'm using the transit as an example, but this is, yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. So just bear with me for a minute. On page 19.
Yes, ma'am.
It
Okay.
says, provide transportation systems that provide freight. Can't read.
Movement.
Yeah, freight movement, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Improve the transportation, and then it lists a couple of the SR6 of those.
Yeah, step
Are
on 6.
those the corridors that have been already defined as the most important corridors?
No, those are really freight corridors in South Fulton. State
Those are
Route
just
6,
Freight.
yes, freight corridors.
So on page 21, proximity to schools and or EMS facilities.
Mhm.
So you're talking about transportation that's close to schools.
And remember, those are the metrics that I talked about.
Right.
And those are, for example, all the attributes that fall under that matrix. For example, this is on the safety. When you look at safety, those are the different things. On the roadway, you look at the high crash locations on the roadway. If, for example, you're looking at safety around schools, that's the one that you just mentioned, the proximity to schools and so on and so forth. So they will be looking at everything from the roadway to schools in terms of safety.
So on the next page, and this is one I'm really interested in, anticipated emissions reduction. And so I can't wait to see what they're going to do to ensure that that occurs.
And emission reductions can be done several ways. One important way in transportation planning, when you take cars away from the road, when you have less car on the road, so therefore there's less emission. You can look at ways to shift the cars to transit. That's one way. Therefore you have less car on the road. Another way you can do that is that you have what they call transportation system management, where you encourage telecommuting. You encourage other measures so that people don't use it. And the third one is the one that ARC is usually pushing now, is technology. When you have car that doesn't emit emissions anymore, when you have good, like,
And trucks.
trucks, yes, yes.
Oh, stakeholder committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Who are the members of the stakeholder?
Okay, I myself is a member, I'm a member of the committee, but they also have the Cascade Merchant Association, that's one committee. They also have the CIDs, they're also stakeholders. It keeps our Fulton beautiful. The airport area chambers of commerce is another one. They have a list, and even the Atlanta bicycle campaign, they try to get someone from different areas so that they can have a complete representation. Even Uber is on the list as a stakeholder, because that's a new way now. Everybody's using Uber and Lyft. So they're trying to get everybody on board so we can have a comprehensive report.
Thank you.
Yes, you are.
Ms. Rao, you were on there.
My question was answered.
Oh, okay. Ms. Willis?
We've only had one stakeholder meeting. When is another stakeholder meeting that we scheduled?
This summer, because now they are in the process of the data collection. Once they have the existing condition, that's when they plan on coming out and share that information with the stakeholder committee. So I think the completion is August or September of this year, then they're gonna have the next one.
One of the things that I had been talking with the other mayor is that when the warehouse situation becomes full blown, people are going to start looking for alternative routes, and which will impact roads that we ordinarily wouldn't not have impacted. And I think that that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, because I'll give you an example, Highway 92. People are going to try to find some alternative ways of getting even the children to school on Highway 92. So we have to look at those impacts from economic development that's going to really reroute the traffic pattern. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item?
Next item is A.R. Long Company with a recap of the 2019 legislative session.
Good afternoon, City of South Fulton City Council. My name is Andrew Long. I'm principal at A.R. Long Company. I am honored to be before you today. I represent you down at the state capitol and do all of your government relations, lobbying, and executive consulting. I work alongside Lolita Browning Jackson, who is here with me today as well. And we are prepared to give you a report of a brief summary of what was accomplished during the legislative session. Let me first say that I feel it was a successful first legislative session for the city of South Fulton. I'm going to briefly go over some bills that we were successful with. I'm going to go over some bills that we were not successful with, and I'm going to go over a few things that impact the city of South Fulton with state legislation. First of all, there were 4 primary bills that I was tasked to get passed throughout this legislative session. One was HB 329, a TAD legislation carried by Representative Marie Metz. That bill did pass, and the bill authorizes the city of South Fulton to create a tax allocation district. House Bill 423 was homestead tax exemption bill. That bill also passed. It was carried by Representative Deborah Bazemore, and it provides for a new homestead exemption from the city of South Fulton ad valorem taxes for municipal purposes. HB 121, which is to incorporate Fulton Industrial Boulevard. We were not successful in getting that piece of legislation through both chambers, and I'm going to expound on that in just a minute. And finally, HB 611, which was the hotel motel tax carried by Representative Derek Jackson. Raises the city of South Fulton's taxes from hotels and motels from 5% to 8%. We were successful in getting that piece of legislation passed as well. So first of all, I want to say from our first engagement earlier this year at a dinner meeting that we had, I want to say we were able to accomplish one of our primary goals, which was to establish a credible presence for the city of South Fulton down at the state capitol. When my colleagues and when legislators now, especially key legislators, even in the executive branch, the governor, lieutenant governor, the speaker, when they see me coming, they know that I represent the city of South Fulton, and they're willing to listen to whatever it is that we have to say. Concerning HB 121, Representative Roger Bruce carried a bill for us and actually got it passed through the House, as it has passed the last couple of legislative sessions. It was not successful in passing through the Senate, and the primary reason why it was held up is because we were fought by the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta, we felt, did not have a stake in HB 121, and they did not have a reason to fight us on this legislation, but they did anyway. There was an attorney that represented the city of Atlanta, who was also their lobbyist, and they had about 4 or 5 lobbyists that were working against us day and night. And they wanted to make sure that 121 did not pass. I will say that I am extremely proud of your City of South Fulton state delegation. I'm proud of your mayor and your city manager, who came down and met with the office of the governor, Brian Kemp. And after the office of Governor Brian Kemp learned that all the parties who were involved in HB 121 were sitting at the table and in agreement that this bill should pass on the same page and on one accord, he was impressed at our togetherness and the way that we were working to try to get this bill moved through the General Assembly. You should all have packets with the summary of what we prepared to give you, and there are about 5 sheets of paper, 5 items that I want to call your attention to. One was obviously the government of the city of South Fulton, a letter from you all, signed by all of you all, in support of HB 121. The second is a letter from Chairman Rob Pitts of the Fulton County Commission, signing, saying that they were unanimously in agreement of HB 121. And then finally, a letter from Fulton County Schools with all the Fulton County School Board members' signature affixed, saying that they were also in support of HB 121. In the end, I don't want to put it all on the city of Atlanta, but I will put it primarily on the city of Atlanta. But there were some wealthy business owners along the stretch of Fulton Industrial Boulevard who simply did not want to be annexed into the city of South Fulton, and they came down to the Capitol and made their presence known. And Senator Donzella James, who was carrying the bill for us in the Senate, decided to table the legislation because she felt strongly that it was going to be defeated on the Senate floor. So the bill right now is tabled in the Senate, and at the beginning of the 2020 legislative session of the Georgia General Assembly, she can, if it's her decision, she can remove that bill from the table and call for a vote. But in between that time, we have a lot of communicating to do, and she's going to listen to us to say whether or not we want to do that with that one piece of legislation. Before I take any questions, I want to talk about the interim and what AR Loan Company is doing in the interim outside of the legislation, outside of the legislative session and in preparation for 2020. Number one, there are annual conferences that happen every year that you might not know about. One is the Georgia Chamber of Commerce that happened last month. I attended that conference. It wasn't specifically on your behalf, but I did represent you there and have a lot of conversations with key legislators at the Georgia Chamber spring meeting. There is a Georgia Legislative Black Caucus annual retreat that is set for September 26th through 28th. I will be there specifically on your behalf. The chairman is Representative Karen Bennett. She represents parts of DeKalb County. And she is expecting me to be there and wants to continue conversations about the city of South Fulton. And finally, Congressional Black Caucus. What I am doing on behalf of the city of South Fulton is primarily on a state level and state politics, not federal, but I do plan on attending the Congressional Black Caucus in Washington, D.C., and will likely have conversations on your behalf with our congressional delegation as well. Almost closing, I want to say that there is a letter in here, a memorandum in here that we have put in place for the ballot questions representing HB 329 and HB 423. 329 is the TAD legislation, and 423 is the homestead tax exemption bill. In preparation for the 2019 local elections, we've outlined generally what must occur before HB 329 and 423 will take effect. There are several things that the legislation requires the municipal election superintendent of the city of South Fulton to do. We have made an outline of exactly what's supposed to happen before, during, and after that election to make sure that you are in compliance on the state level with the legislation that we passed on your behalf, or that was passed on your behalf. All the way down to the ballot question, the language of the ballot questions themselves. That is the second to last page of the document. And finally, the last page is simply a letter from myself, Lolita, and Anna Edmondson, who also works with me down at the state capitol, simply saying thank you, and that we are honored to be able to represent you and consult, be your consultants down at the state capitol on behalf of the city of South Fulton. Again, let me reiterate that we did have a successful first legislative session. There's a lot of communicating that we have to do between now and November 15th, which is the first time you can introduce legislation for the next session for 2020, so that everyone will be on the same page of what we want to see done for next year, who's going to carry that legislation, and what the language actually looks like. So we do have a lot of communicating to do. But as your lobbyist, as your consultant, as your government relations person to the state capitol, I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity to represent you. And I look forward to having meetings with you individually as we get closer to the 2020 legislative session. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Khalid?
Do you know, and perhaps someone up here knows, but what is the deadline for us to submit language for ballot questions for the municipal election?
That may be a more appropriate question.
Right. I just, whoever.
Yes, thank you for your question. We have been in communication with the Fulton County Department of Registration and Elections, and actually asked if we get that to them by qualifying in August. So the bill is actually prescriptive in terms of what the exact language should be, so we will be forwarding what's in the package here.
Right, but beyond, I was actually asking beyond these two, if there are any additional questions that we wanted to add to the November 5th ballot. What is the deadline for us to get those questions to the Board of Elections?
I can find that out for you. We would have to get that information. We communicated to them that these are the only two questions we have at this time. If there are others, then we need to check with them to make sure that we can get that to them at an appropriate time.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Okay, Ms. Willard?
Yes. So there was another dynamic that you did not mention at the Capitol regarding House Bill 121, and that is we have 3 people on the Senate side in the Senate delegation for South Fulton, and 1 did not support the legislation and got up and spoke openly against the legislation and worked with the Atlanta delegation to stop the legislation. And yeah, we had some powerful companies that contacted them as well, and the individual who who represents part of South Fulton and went against South Fulton, the wishes and desires to annex FIB into the city. And I think that needs to be addressed. How it needs to be addressed, I don't know, but no one ever wants to talk about it, but it needs to be addressed, because if we do bring this we will bring this legislation back next year, that does not need to be a factor. And one of the things that individual did say is that no one communicated with her regarding this legislation. Now, I find that hard to believe, but I know this is the time to talk to legislators in the summer. And if it needs to happen, if a conversation needs to happen, and she needs to speak with the leadership over the summer, I would really like that to be encouraged, because I don't want that to be an excuse next year. The other thing is, in August, the study committee for John Talbot will be at Walker Park. There was a study committee at the Capitol last month, and I did testify at the study committee, but they are bringing the study committee to Walker Park, and that's relative to youth sports injuries.
Okay.
And so, if we can have some presence there. I'm not sure what legislation is going to come from that study committee, but what I will tell you was a very impactful conversation last month, and I can see something coming from out of that study committee. So whatever comes out of that study committee, I would like to support it.
So it would be your goal to have language introduced in the 2020 session regarding sports injuries?
Yes,
In the city of South Fulton?
youth sports injuries.
Youth sports injuries. Okay.
And House Representative William Bodie, he is the vice chair of that study committee.
Thank you.
I think that is it.
To address the senator that was in opposition of HB 121, we did, I did personally, AR Loan Company did, several of us did reach out to her to speak with her concerning HB 121. Initially, in our first meeting, dinner meeting that we had, she was not present. So I briefed her on what we wanted to accomplish this session on behalf of the city of South Fulton. I did not arrange a one-on-one sit-down with her, the mayor, the city manager, or anything prior to that time, but I did go out and reach out to her and speak with her personally about that legislation. So I will do that and continue to communicate with her, because yes, I do know that we're going to bring this legislation up again, and I'll make sure that that we do the proper communicating that we're supposed to do, so she won't be in opposition in 2020.
The other dynamic was, there was a dynamic, although you reported that there was a unanimous vote for Fulton County Commission to support House Bill 121, there was one commissioner who actively came down to the Capitol and also worked against South Fulton, so that needs to be addressed as well. And then lastly, the transport license for City of South Fulton, we really need that addressed in the 2020 session as well. And we have a new fire chief, Mr. Chief Freddie Broom, that I would encourage that you communicate with him regarding that.
Okay, Mr. Long.
Yes, ma'am.
We reached our limit, but I'm going to allow Ms. Gilliard to speak.
Okay.
All right.
I just wanted to make a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I don't know about early on, but I can say from 2013 up to this past session, the Atlanta does it every year, each and every year, and it's usually the same people. So, I'm a little bit, I don't know what word to use, you know, about doing the same thing over and over again. We do the same thing over and over again and expect something different to happen. That's insane. So we need to really strategize and come up with something else, because I just think trying to get it through is going to continue to be a hassle for numerous reasons. I just want to make that clear.
Let me close on this. I agree with Ms. Gilliard. And I think my comments for the manager and you, Ms. Long, that we need to start strategizing how we're going to get this done. All right? There are things that we could have done last time that we didn't do, or maybe things that we could have gotten in earlier on. So I would like to start strategizing. I agree with her. I'd like for us to start strategizing on that right now.
Yes, sir.
And y'all did a wonderful job, I think, this session. But you know, if you're gonna keep somebody in all day, you got to do mother, coke, and peanuts. You're gonna keep us all day. But we're glad to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor.
Thank you, council.
I would like to move that we go into executive session with Mr. Steve Langford. What is it? I would like to move that we go into executive session with Mr. A.R. Long. And then we also have questions of Mr. Steve Langford. So I guess that will be real estate and personnel.
What's the reason we're going?
Real estate and personnel.
Or just for Mr. Steve Long?
Well, for Mr. Long, real estate, for Mr. Langford, personnel.
Well, he's,
Second.
I think we don't do it.
I'm talking about I'm at the classification and compensation studies. I'm sorry, I was mixing names up. I'm sorry. Personnel for classification and compensation study.
Second.
The property moved to second. We're going into executive session. All those in favor? For personnel
And real estate.
and real estate? That passes. Madam Attorney, we're going to interrupt and the clerk. We're going to interrupt this session, going to an early session of is that acceptable?
That is, you can discuss an
Right.
agenda item in executive session.
Right. Let's go.
Yes, sir.
Madam Clerk, were there any decisions made in executive session?
None.
Okay, hearing that, I'll accept the motion to close the executive session.
I'll make a motion to close the executive session.
Second.
Been properly moved to second. Any discussion? Go ahead.
I would ask that the report prepared by Russell and Company be included in the future documentation on the agenda item that we discussed.
All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Did I make a motion to reopen the regular? Okay, we'll resume the work session. Madam Clerk.
Next item is on the agenda is Steve Langford, Ackerman and Company would like to have a discussion on commercial investments.
Okay, Mr. Langford.
He said it was in the back.
It's in the back.
He's in the home.
Come on up, Mr. Langford.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Steve Langford. resident of City of South Fulton and commercial real estate broker with Ackerman Company, commercial real estate. I did have some slides, but I can kind of walk through the basic essence of what I wanted to present to you all this evening. I've been in commercial real estate now for coming up on about 15 years. And I've spent the past 20 years actually in Southwest Atlanta, City of South Fulton. Oh, there we go.
The presentation is in our package.
So as a matter of reference, to give you maybe a little more background in terms of my experience, and more specifically my experience in this region. I've been involved in numerous commercial transactions, very sizable. I've been blessed to be able to pick and choose the transactions that I actually participate in, and I tend to focus on those that are meaningful. One of the things that was very obvious is the lack of commercial real estate development on the south side. That's not a secret. Things that I've learned over the years are the reasons why. There are both external factors and then there are internal factors. The external factors sometimes can be impacted by what we do internally. But I'll get to that a little later. But in addition to that, I've also spent several years in banking. I was a manager, assistant manager at the Wells Fargo Bank on Old National Highway, and the actual manager for the Greenbrier office. So I've been in this area for quite some time, and I've seen a number of things over the years. One thing that I haven't seen was the type of commercial development and investment in this area that you see in other parts of the city. And the reason that I wanted to speak to you all is that as a commercial practitioner, I've chosen to make this area an area that I focus on, with specific understanding and focus that this area has been void of real development. And one of the reasons for that is that you have individuals coming from other areas basically telling you kind of what you need or what the area should do. Since I'm a resident here, I figure I've got somewhat of a unique perspective to be able to speak as a resident, but also as a commercial real estate practitioner. So I want to just share some things from a commercial real estate practitioner perspective that I hope will provide you with some guidelines in terms of helping to navigate development for the city of South Fulton as we move forward. Just a real quick recap in terms of attracting business to the area. If you ask someone what is economic development, you're going to probably get a different answer depending on who you ask. But essentially, what the whole objective is to attract business, whether it's existing businesses relocating from another area, expansion, or ground-up development. For the city of South Fulton, there's a tremendous amount of undeveloped land that is just waiting to be developed, but developed respectively. So the city has a lot that's going on for it, but there's a couple of things that there are areas of improvement that, from a commercial real estate standpoint, that we could be hindering ourselves and not necessarily realizing. Transportation is one, and it's not an issue in terms of, it's not a secret rather, in terms of some of the areas that we could perhaps improve on. And I bring this up specifically because transportation is not a sexy issue, but if you really want development, transportation-oriented development is here to stay, and it's the way of the future. So being able to invest in transportation infrastructure is absolutely vital. Sometimes you may have those who may speak against it, but sometimes it's a matter of just educating them as to the reasons why it's significant. City of South Fulton has a tremendous opportunity of learning from its neighbors who failed to make the proper investment in transportation infrastructure. And so now they're having to try to find ways to backfill, and it takes a tremendous amount of money later on to try to undo what should have been done at the onset. So if we could look at focusing on transportation as an area that we could really need to focus on. I think the city of South Fulton may not show initially, but over time, it will end up being one of the most invaluable investments that the city can make. The other issue is with regards to the kind of negative perception that we get in the press. Now, why that is important is because when you talk to developers or companies to relocate, sometimes you may think that that's not important, but it really is important. They do Google searches, and unfortunately, sometimes that's the extent of the research that they do to understand whether or not a community is worth going to invest millions and millions of dollars. I can't tell you the number of investors that I've talked to who have told me, yeah, I want to invest in the metro Atlanta area, but don't show me anything south of I-20. So the perception that there's a bias or perception that investing in south of I-20 is not necessarily good is very real. That doesn't apply to everyone, but it's real. And so what happens is that when there's a certain perception, news articles and news reports typically tend to help either validate those perceptions, because someone has an idea of something. It doesn't take much for them to say, oh yeah, well, that's what I thought. So anyway, so just a couple of recommendations I think the city can implement. It's in your packet. These are some things that I think will be extremely instrumental from a commercial real estate standpoint in terms of affecting those internal components that make it easy for someone to discount coming to the city of South Fulton. And despite all the good things that we have going on, we can ultimately end up shooting ourselves in the foot and not realize it, because companies have options. They can go any place. They can go to the city next door. They can go to the next state. They've got options. And so you want to make certain that all the good that the city has, that's really what they see and are attracted to come to the area. So one of the things, and again, you have the information from me. I don't want to go through it line by line as to belabor the issue, but a couple of things I think that are absolutely worth noting. One is to develop and implement a spirit of deliberative, collaborative success. What that means is that rising tide lifts all boats. So, you may have some districts that may not necessarily get the same attention as some other districts, but at the end of the day, collectively, the city will be uplifted. Can't say enough about that. I understand the city is working on the development master plan. We need to get that in place as soon as possible so that developers understand when they come to the city what the city expectations are. That way you don't end up wasting a lot of time looking at things that may or may not be consistent with what it is that you really want to see. Can't speak enough about the Fulton Industrial Corridor. A lot of people may not necessarily recognize its economic value, but it's huge. So I understand there's some legal issues going on with that, but to the extent that the city can be very aggressive in being able to get it under its wings, it would be a coup, to say the least. This is really important. The messaging. Have to be very thoughtful and measured with regards to the messages, the messaging that gets out to the public about what's taking place down here. And obviously, the media loves a negative story. And what we want to do is make certain that we don't give them anything to report on, unless it's something good. Then, of course, being able to better understand that the competition is not within, the competition is without. And so when we don't necessarily take advantage of all that we have to offer and really work in a collective fashion, recognizing that someone's going to get some glory one time, but at another time it'll eventually happen. We lose out to someone else who's just waiting in the wings to take advantage of those opportunities. I'll stop there. That's a bit of a rushed presentation, and I apologize for having rushed through it. I recognize that my time is spent. I want to make sure that I at least provide just some pearls of wisdom from the commercial real estate sector in terms of how the area is viewed, some of the things that the city can do to incorporate how it goes about conducting its business to really better make it very easy for someone to want to come here. If we focus on having a commitment to excellence internally, Everything else will take care of itself, and all the energy that's expended in terms of trying to attract others to come to the area, you won't have to do that because they'll want to come because of what's taking place there. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I think that you see us not saying anything because you ain't said nothing wrong. Everything you said, especially in the area of those recommendations, have been spot on. And I think we as a board need to really take a look at that and take these recommendations seriously as we go out in terms of finding economic development. So I want to thank you for your presentation.
Councilmember Cleveland.
I'm sorry, Mr. Khalid in the field.
Do you all still own that building at 1691 Phoenix Boulevard?
No, that's all.
Okay. What properties do you own in South Or Ackerman, not
Currently, no.
Okay. Has there, outside of these things, has there been any, why do you think that is? Why has Ackerman not made any further investment beyond that?
Well, instead of focusing on Ackerman, I would say if the real issue is putting it on the investment community. Investment community's focus is basically going where they can get a return on their investment with as little risk as possible.
One of the things that I've been talking with some of our staff about is that our building and permit fee schedule is, are you familiar with that schedule at all?
Okay.
That our fees are far below what others cities' fees are. And I'm just wondering, do you have any recommendations or any thoughts about that?
Well, I can't speak to it specifically because I can't comment on what the city of South Fulton's fees are. But here's what I will say. I gave it, if you look at the list that I gave about all the good that's happening within the city of South Fulton, it far exceeds the areas of improvement. But those two items within the areas of improvement can be the ultimate downfall and can eliminate all the good that exists there in the minds of an investor or business looking to relocate. So whether it's fees or whatever the good you have, the focus really needs to be on cleaning up those areas of deficiencies, and everything else will be able to shine accordingly.
All right. That's all. Thanks.
Ms. Rao?
My question really speaks to, I know, you're coming to present to us in South Fulton, but I know you work in other municipalities in South Fulton because this is your region. And, whether we think about it or not, we are competing with even smaller cities. And so when you think about the toolkit that we've started to develop for the city, the Freeport, the Development Authority, the TAD, are there other tools that you see that we might need to consider or think about to make us better positioned? And I heard what you said about the deficiency, so I get that. But from a tool to be able to attract the development that we want in the area, are there any things that you kind of see out there that you've seen that are very effective?
Well, yes. One is that you've already put it in place here recently, and that's the Development Authority. That's huge. That's huge from a developer standpoint, because they need to be able to know that they've got a resource and an avenue that they can go to in terms of working with the city and being able to get transactions done. So with regards to the toolkit, I would say right now, what you have in place is more than sufficient in terms of being able to appeal to the development and the business community. Are there some things that you could add? Perhaps. But I would say at this juncture, as the city is growing, I would say take what you currently have within the toolkit and enhance it and focus on improving those other areas. That way you can get the most out of it. Because again, all of that really becomes somewhat nominal or insignificant in the eyes of some if they already made up in their mind, you know what, there's issues there, I can't go there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Langford, I did have a question.
Mr. Langford, just get one more. I asked everybody to get into the queue, please.
Well, I did, but it's not registering for me, so I'm not registering why. So one of the tools that Georgia Municipal Association offers is comprehensive economic development class for all cities, since Georgia has 538 cities. And I did take a series of that class over the summer. One of the things they did mention is that investors, all may be good, but if it's a controversial environment, they won't come. And if it's an environment that's not conducive to education and public safety, they won't come. And so can you just be candid with us and tell us if you foresee those 3 areas being a major issue for South Fulton?
Well, I can't really speak to that only from the standpoint that, because I'm not on that side of the desk. Is it something I think is insurmountable? Absolutely not. But it all starts within in terms of understanding, and then the very first point that I have was this commitment to collaborative excellence. Meaning, one of the things that I would suggest, and again, this is real talk, is the issues that the council may have with one another are probably best served behind closed doors and hash them out before come back out. That way, it doesn't mean that you don't have issues, but it's how they're handled. So all the issues that you mentioned are absolutely things that can be overcome. The city of South Fulton is some of its greatest assets are its residents. So with regards to education, with regards to economic development, or you got some solid people that you have that's on there that's representing the city. So in terms of being able to deal with those issues, the city of South Fulton absolutely has the resources of being able to do it. But what you don't want to have happen yet, I don't mean to repeat the word. The short answer to your question is yes, I think it's something that we can overcome.
Okay, thank you so much. Madam Clerk?
Next item is Russell Campbell with Management Advisory Group. Will give a presentation on the classification and compensation study.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and Colin Henderson, Director of Human Resources. So great to see you all. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Russell Campbell, who's with the Management Advisory Group. He is a vice president with the organization, and this is the company that was engaged to conduct the city's first class and comp study. So the report that you have before you and what he'll be presenting is just a general overview of the study. The full implementation with all the details will be shared with you before the end of this week.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As I said a few weeks ago when I was here last, that I would come back and share with you the results, findings and recommendations of the study. And we've reached that point to where we are prepared to share with you the whole kit and caboodle of what we've come up with, the financial impact, and what we're recommending going forward. As I go through, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I just want to briefly say the HR department did a great job of supporting this effort and responding to our requests for various pieces of information along the way. Study goals and objectives. These goals and objectives are typical when you do a comprehensive organizational-wide compensation classification study. This particular study was no different. We focused looking at all of the positions within the organization, compared positions to relevant labor markets, which we developed a list of organizations we thought the city needed to be competitive with as it relates to pay. We submitted that list. The city did some editing and added some additional what we call targets to the list, and so we included those. We wanted to make sure that those jobs that have similar or equal requirements with respect to education, experience, as well as the complexity of the duties and responsibilities are paid along the same pay line. And ultimately what we did was develop a new competitive pay structure. A lot of what we found that was in place was actually borrowed from Fulton County as the HR department was in the process of getting up and running. So now what we've done is put in place a structure and compensation plan that's unique to the jobs and the needs of Fulton County. We also looked at some of the policies as it relates to pay with respect to things such as demotion, transfers, lateral moves, regarding how pay should be handled, so there's some consistency involved as people move and get promoted, making sure that everyone is treated the same. The scope of the study was all 500 positions or employees, and it encompassed about 126 different job titles And one of the most, I think, significant objectives of the study was to establish a $15 per hour floor for all jobs within the city. And we're happy to report that there is not a job within the city of South Fulton that pays less than $15 an hour as a result of this study. The methodology we used to put the study together, we had all employees complete a job questionnaire that was specifically tailored to look at their duties and responsibilities relative to our 14-point criteria to dissect and analyze the different jobs within the organization. We held meetings throughout the city where employees were invited to come in, get a briefing on how to complete the questionnaire, and an overview of how the study was to come together. We also had individual meetings, one-on-one interviews with department management to talk about issues relative to recruitment and retention to make sure that those things were addressed as we put together the study so that they could go out and recruit the type of labor to fill the numerous vacancies that exist and are sure to come as the city begins to grow and expand. We conducted a market survey of about 14 different peers or jurisdictions in the region, not only looking at wages and salary, but we also looked at benefits to see where the city stood with regard to its indirect compensation when we're talking about benefits. We also found that there were some titles and classifications that needed to be changed or brought better in line with what market forces are determining is an appropriate classification for a given job at this point in time. And we will be providing some software so that the HR department can maintain the study going forward should there be new positions created or existing jobs, duties and responsibilities change. They will be able to grade those jobs and determine whether or not they should move up or down within the existing grade structure that we've come up with. And finally, we've provided a detailed implementation plan with respect to transitioning current staff from the old compensation system over to the new system. The items that I've talked about are kind of summarized in this graphical form, showing the activities that were associated with the study. There's about 8 or 9 different steps that we went through to put this process together. I would note that as a part of best practices with respect to human resources management, ideally speaking, you probably want to undergo a thorough review of this type every 5 or 6 years to make sure that you take advantage of market conditions as well as address any internal restructuring or changes that may have taken place within that 5 or 6 year period. In the interim years, HR can do surveys for different job groups and job families. Like 1 year, they may want to do a comprehensive survey of public safety positions, followed by maybe the next year they want to look at skilled craft, mechanics, equipment operators, just to get some idea where the market may be trending in those interim years. And then when you get to the 5th or 6th year, it's time to do it all over again from a comprehensive standpoint. The organizations that we looked at and contacted and collected salary information on the screen there: City of Atlanta, Marietta, Decatur, Roswell, Sandy Springs, John Creek, and Alpharetta. We looked at Athens, Clark County, Fulton County, DeKalb County, Cobb County, Clayton County, Fulton County School District, and private sector data came from ONET Online, which is basically the Federal Department of Labor, their Bureau of Labor Statistics. They collect private sector wages throughout the region, and so we were able to match up jobs that we could find in the private sector with those positions that exist within city government. We do not contact any particular one private sector organization because they're not compelled to provide wage and salary information, whereas government entities are compelled under the Freedom of Information Act to provide that information because it's public record. Overall, in terms of how the city stood on entry-level salaries, those are positions that are advertised and applicants apply who just meet the minimum qualifications with respect to education and experience. You are off about 1% at the market average, which is where you'll find what we call the midpoint of the market point, where you'll find proficient, highly skilled individuals receiving salaries somewhere around that level. You're about 2.1% off. And on the top end, you're about 4.2% off market as it relates to this point in time. The city's benefits package is one of the most competitive in the region, particularly employee contributions for health insurance premiums are at the lower end of the scale among the peers that we looked at. with respect to number of holidays offered, lead time, all are at or above what you will find within the region. So the indirect benefits are very good. And the only missing equation was getting the salaries up to where they were more competitive, which we argue that the study does that. So this positions, we think, the city to be an employer of choice as it respects to pay and benefits going forward. Some of the positions that we found that were competitive based on the current salary levels that were being paid. Permit specialist, director of parks and recreation, city clerk, business tax specialist, police chief, and city manager. Pay for those positions were very competitive at the onset of the study. Those positions that we found that were not very competitive, and we define not competitive by jobs that were off at least 10% with respect to the marketplace. Those were police officer 2, police sergeant, heavy equipment mechanic, accounting associate, director of information technology, and the deputy fire chief position. We created 2 separate pay plans under the same umbrella to provide flexibility with respect to police and fire. We've given them their own pay structure. There are 18 job titles that comprise the public safety pay plan. It is what we call an open range system. In other words, there's a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. It does not contain any step increments within that plan. There are 12 grades within the public safety plan, and the range spread from the entry level to the top end is 50%. All the rest of the jobs that are not considered public safety are placed in what we call the unified plan, which consists of the vast majority of jobs within the organization. We have 108 job titles there. It's an open range plan. There's 26 grade levels to that plan, and the range width is a little longer or wider than the public safety plan. It's about 55% from minimum to maximum. There are 5% intervals between grades to make sure that we address issues like salary compression, which is a situation when you have large number of individuals with varying time and position all clustered around the bottom of the pay structure. The end result of this structure and creating the 2 different pay plans is it positions the city to be more competitive and flexible with respect to negotiating starting rates pay or moving employees within the existing ranges, and it makes even the entry-level salaries competitive, and it brings everyone in line with current market conditions. Overall, we'd like to see the city move aggressively into a pay-for-performance or merit pay system. You can still provide annual cost of living adjustments, and let me be clear, a cost of living adjustment, a COLA, is not a pay raise. It is a hedge against increasing prices or inflation. It's not a pay raise. So you can still do a modest cost of living adjustment, and then any additional monies for salary increases would be based on how well one performs during the course of the year. Just to give you some idea of where we started and where we wound up, we've created a classification called firefighter recruit. That job has an entry-level salary of $42,786 annually, which makes it very competitive within the region. A firefighter starting salary will be $44,926. Previously, it was $39,536. For a fire corporal, police officer 2, the starting salary moves to $52,007 per year on the upper end of the pay scale within the region. And some more of the public safety jobs as we go through. You'll find that the bulk of the implementation costs, which I will be sharing with you momentarily, went to public safety. And I'm going to be able to share with you the actual numbers of employees that were impacted in terms of getting adjustments as it relates to the state, just to further emphasize where the bulk of the monies were going. Public safety, because you're in a region, an urban region where there's so many jurisdictions that have police and fire departments and EMS units, it's basically a jockeying contest for labor. You raise the bar, someone else raises the bar a little higher. We hope that we position the bar well enough ahead or in line with the competition where you can compete across the board with anyone within the rank structure of public safety for a given position. Having done what we call quality of work life surveys around the country, when we go in and we ask employees what causes them to come work for an organization, or want to work for an organization, or stay with an organization. Pay is always in the top three, but it's never outside of the top three, but it's not always number one. Sometimes folks are concerned about job security, the benefits, as well as advancement opportunities. So pay alone will not be the sole indicator whether or not someone comes to work for the city of Fulton, but it will be a major part of the equation for sure. We are recommending that the study be implemented effective October 1, 2019. Of the 500 employees covered in the study, 355 would need adjustment to the proposed minimum of the new pay structure to transition over from the existing system. Specifically in fire, of the 161 personnel, 102 would receive an adjustment as it relates to the study. For fire, that would cost $387,079. It would change payroll for the fire department by 4.6%. In the police department, of the 131 positions that were subject to the study, 118 receive an adjustment as it relates to the study, which costs $691,950 and change payroll in that department by 10.14%. And then the remaining city departments, of the 208 employees that comprise non-public safety positions, 136 are receiving adjustments, which total $417,196. We found that there were 104 employees that were making less than $15 an hour prior to the study. Now they're all making at least $15 an hour. Overall, the study's impact to payroll is about 7.06%. In actual dollars, to bring the 356 of 500 employees up to the minimum, it's just under $1.5 million. Which for the citywide total, it's about a 5.8% increase. So it's not excessive by any means, but it does position the city in a good position to be an employer of choice, as I said. We provided policy recommendations on promotions, reclasses, temporary assignments, hiring, as well as addressing any employees who may be earning salaries that are above the maximum going forward, how their salaries should be handled. And all of these are a reflection of what we find to be best practices in the field of human resources management at this point in time. Next step, as I said, is to adopt the new classification assignments, the new pay structure ranges, and implement October 1st. Any questions about anything I've talked about? Yes, sir.
That's my job.
Yeah, that's his job. Let me get
Mr. Clee,
Go ahead, Ms. Robinwood. I'm not ready.
Ms. who? Job.
So in total, if we look at the, bringing everything up to par with fire, police, and all other employees, we're talking about 2.1 million that we have for budget in total for next fiscal year?
No, in terms of raw salary without benefits, we're at 1.5 million.
Okay. And can you tell me, did you look at any additional benefits like housing? I know that's a common offer that you see occurring in public safety. Did you see anything relative to that or look at that in your study at all?
We did not look at that in the context of coming up with, the baseline values of the positions. Most of the organizations that I've worked with that have those type of programs, usually they're able to support them with some type of grant dollars through their community development department. And so we'd be happy to help with that and work with community development if you'd like to see something that come to fruition.
Well, I know we'll get to that later, but I do think one of the things I know we hear from residents is, they want to see public safety personnel living in the community. And so if we had an opportunity to look at some of that, I hope we would be aggressive in that way and try to find incentives.
We did look at whether or not other jurisdictions allow officers to drive cars home. And that was,
which I think we have a lot of that in place, but
yes.
it's the housing benefits. But thank you.
Mr. Khalid.
I brought this issue up several times over the years that studies have shown that officers with degrees have less use of force complaints amongst the cities that we're compared with. I know that some of them, like the city of Marietta, has a graduated schedule for people with degrees. The city of Johns Creek requires their officers to have a college degree or a certain test score. So I'm wondering, did you consider that in this pay range? I know you said that there wasn't do you have a recommendation? Do you have any thoughts about that?
We are still working with the city, and we're working with the HR director, Ms. Henderson, to look at the viability of offering additional compensation for those officers that do come on board with college degrees.
Thank you.
Let me say that very simple for employees to work for the city. They come to work on time, they work hard, and they don't lie. I think that we owe it to our employees to bring them up, Mr. Donald, to these levels, to be competitive with other cities. They have families to feed, and they should at least be paid a salary that's commensurate with what they do, especially public safety. You said it best that anytime it's very competitive to hold on to police and fire. Every time somebody gets a $2 raise, they run to the other side in most cases. But we don't have a whole lot of that with our police. Not now yet. But the other incentive, as I think that Ms. Rowell talked about and others, of having the cars in some other kind of way to incentivize them beyond that. You were right when you said sometimes it ain't always the salary. Sometimes it's the salary plus. But I think each one of us up here would like to be assured that we pay a decent wage for a good job for every employee that we have. So I just think it's important that we implement this. You know, $1.5 million, as pertains to our workforce, there ain't a lot of money. And it would help with the morale of our employees, knowing that we have been committed to take care of them. So thank you for your presentation.
And I just want to say, the city of South Fulton is only the third city or county in the state of Georgia that has established a $15 an hour minimum wage. So it should be committed to that.
Well, I think that's good. I think they did a good job. Thank you so much. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this.
I'll make a motion to adjourn our work session.
I second.
Properly moved and second. Any discussion? Why don't we take a few minutes, take a break, and come back for the 7 o'clock?
We didn't vote.
Yes, we did. Did we vote? All in favor? I'm sorry. The left did not. Okay, that passes. Let's take about 5-6 minutes.